Oninye, hey, how are you? For folks who just joined and for folks who are chatting us right here in the webinar on the Zoom, we will start momentarily. Oh, looks like we're good to go. So thank you all for joining us today. My name is Reba Monachin Atri, and I am here very excited to welcome you to the GMSA Alumni Forum. Don't Survive, Thrive, Tips for Getting Through the Global Pandemic as a Community, hosted by the Gates Millennium Scholars Alumni Association. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I am so honored today to serve as your moderator for tonight's webinar. As I mentioned, my name is Reba, and I worked with the alumni program from 2014 to 2016. So excited to be back with you all, so excited to see so many familiar names here. And we have a phenomenal GMS alumni panel tonight here with you. I'm going to let them introduce themselves momentarily, but first, hey everyone, before we start, we have a poll. So this webinar is on mental health, and so we wanted to do a quick mental health check-in with you all. So you should see a poll pop up, it just popped up on my screen, asking, how are you doing? And the options are, I'm doing really great, I'm doing pretty good, I'm doing okay, I guess, I'm starting to struggle, I'm having a really hard time, and I need to reach out for support. And this is really just to gauge how you all are doing, how our community is doing, and we'll share the results of this poll. You're allowed to check as many responses as you would like. And underneath that poll, there's a second question of how do you identify? And this is also just to get a gauge of if folks are currently in a situation where they're employed, where they're unemployed, if you're a current student watching this, if you're a parent. We know each of these different categories and each of these different demographics are going through various things right now. And so feel free to select the responses that apply to you. And while you're thinking about those responses and while you're responding to that poll, I just have a few logistics before we start our panel questions. So first, I want to thank you to all of you who have been able to join our GMS AA Alumni Forum panels thus far. There have been a few webinars, and we love the GMS family. We love all the folks who have really dedicated time and energy and volunteered their time to be a part of this family. So thank you all. Hopefully you are involved with us in your local chapters when you're able to actually connect locally. And hopefully you're using the hashtag GMS Alumni Forum so that you can engage with us on social media. GMS alumni are on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And so this alumni forum will be recorded and shared. It's currently on Facebook Live. So we'll be able to share both the recorded forum as well as a resource document with you within the next 24 hours to all of our participants. And you may have noticed that we are currently in webinar mode. So we appreciate you all being patient with this new normal, and we do welcome your comments, but unfortunately there may be times where I don't see your questions in the webinar, or I may not be able to answer every question or allow the panel to answer every question. So I will do my best to address every question or comment, but given the format today, I appreciate your patience. We also recognize that this is a sharp shift to online platforms, and that's one of the things that we will talk about today. But hopefully when we go back to the normal situation where we're actually able to connect with folks face to face, we hope that you still do continue to connect, and that we all come out of this stronger and better, and just more bonded together throughout all of this. Now, before we start, I also want to share that the opinions shared today are by our individual panelists as well as myself, the moderator, and they're not representative of our respective employers. So just want to say that. And something else that I think is very important to say is that today we are going to be able to give you strategies, tips, different methods to be able to address the anxieties that you may be feeling today. Many of these anxieties are disproportionately affecting communities of color. Many of these anxieties may have already been there, but are exacerbated by the impacts of COVID-19, by the coronavirus. Many of our communities are experiencing great loss, whether that is loss of freedom, loss of security, loss of actual lives. And we've seen through lots of different news sources that our communities are being impacted in so many different ways, whether that is attacks because of this being called a Chinese virus to the Asian community, whether that is the number of deaths that have been exponentially and disproportionately affecting our Black and Latinx communities, whether that is the fact that so many of our family and friends are essential workers and having to go out every day. All of these different things are causing added anxieties, and all of our panelists have worked in or have engaged in mental health and mental health support. And so that's why we brought this wonderful group of folks together today. But we also want to say, if you need individualized support, please, please, please seek that out. Please get that. We can only go so far in a 1-hour webinar today. And so we want to make sure that we say, if you need support, there are so many resources out there, and we will be sending you some of those, many of which are free, and you just need to know about them. And so hopefully you are getting that for yourself. But today, we're hoping that we can have just a great uplifting conversation of how folks have really worked to thrive in this setting, in this new normal, as I said. And so I'd like to first, without further ado, share the poll results. So it looks like about 40%, so 39% of folks are doing okay, I guess. And with a mix of folks kind of all over the board in terms of doing really great to I need to reach out for support. And so we are going to address all of those different things today. So folks doing really great, how are you doing great? And like, how can we all do great? And how can we spread that love and positivity? And for the folks who need to reach out for support, different resources and different ways that folks can come together and seek out that support. We also see that folks are over 57%, so over the majority of folks are employed, which is wonderful, but we do have a percentage of folks, 17%, who are unemployed, 26% of folks are students, so high population of students in our Gates Millennium Scholars program, and so folks are kind of all over the board in terms of where they may be. I guess a few parents in the program, but not as many joined our webinar today. So good to know who we're talking to and panelists as you give your responses today. That'll be good to keep in mind as well. So without further ado, let's get started. And panelists, I would love for you all to introduce yourselves. Today we have Miss Ashley Freeman, Ben McAfee, and Dr. Osa Hidalgo de la Riva. And so let's start with introductions, and we'll start with Ashley.
Hi everyone, I am Ashley Freeman. I'm a Gates Scholar from the year of 2009. So if you're in the same year, please drop it in the chat. I would love to connect with you, especially. I want to connect with everyone, but especially the same class as myself. So I'm originally from New York. I currently live in the DC area. I work full-time in public health, which I love because I get to help people, especially during times like this. And outside of my 9 to 5, I actually am developing an asset. I have some awesome mentors who retired when they were 22 years old and now they're 45. So when things like this happen, you know, they're unfazed by it because they are at a level in life where financial independence is real. And so I'm like, you know, when situations like this happen or the government shutting down, I'm like, that's where I want to be. I want to be financially independent and not depending on a job, because unfortunately at this time I know a lot of people who have lost jobs. So I'm really big on financial independence and entrepreneurship. And then outside of that, I have my own platform called don'tdieafraid.com. And that is a place where I inspire people to realize that their circumstances don't hinder their future. They're just stepping stones to success, to reveal how resilient you truly are. And I feel like all of us as Gates scholars know exactly what that means. We were probably born into some situation that we couldn't control, and that's what led us down this path. So my goal is to be able to inspire children, especially through building up their mental health, that no matter what your parents are going through, no matter what environment you're in, that does not hinder your future. And you all are great testimonies to that as well. So it is a pleasure and honor to be here with you today.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Ben?
Thank you, Ashley. That was very inspiring. So it's definitely a pleasure to be here with you. So yeah, my name is Benjamin. I've done a lot of work with mental health. I live personally with a mental illness, so a lot of my experiences come through that. If you want to find out, a lot more about me, you can just go on my website, benjaminmcafee.com. But in general, I've worked with the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I have worked with people who live with addiction. I've done public speaking, talking about mental health issues in the healthcare system as well. So there's just a lot of things that I've done, and I got my master's at Emory. Tina's on there, so we were the same year, and my focus was on mental health. So you can definitely ask some questions later on, or find me on my website, and yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. And Dr. Osaber.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be back in this community. I don't really feel like I left. You're always in my heart, even though we take different paths sometimes. I wanted to first give thanks to my ancestors, and I want to acknowledge the land that I'm sitting on right now as a Ohlone land, and give thanks to my family, and you are my family, my blood and extended familia as well. I think I've lived a life that's been coloring out of the box, as we say. Most of my life has been that way. Having cancer at 15 years old, being basically kicked out of a few PhD programs, finishing up with 3 master's degrees finally, and a PhD. I've gone through a lot of traumas. I just had a conversation with my cousins from Stockton, and they're one of the poor, most hurt financially communities and cities in all of the United States. That's been going on since I was a kid. And so I want to today, to my message, I guess, or my what I want to share about thriving and surviving is that we all, just by being Gates Millennium Scholars and even now alumni, that we understand we've had the privilege to be able to be supported, to follow some of our dreams and help manifest them. And we're all, obviously, those of us here, we're still alive, and giving thanks for that and recognition. But at the same time, in this moment, I want to say this was not my first pandemic that I'm experiencing. We just finished a documentary that's bilingual about 6 friends of mine that died of AIDS. And so that way that pandemic hit the LGBT Latino community, even here, I'm in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, that's still in my heart and in my mind, and those spirits are still here, even though they're not here in this reality, they're still here. And so I want to acknowledge that pandemic and trauma, yes, it's amplified, like the computers have amplified our numbers, and the magnificent amount of people that have died is unbelievable. And realizing that GMS, we've always been the type that not only tried to help ourselves, but we also have helped other people. Every GMS person that I've ever met is all about helping other people. And I think that is part of the message, that I have some strategies to continue on in that. And thank you for letting me be a part of this talk today.
That's great. Thank you so much, Osa. That's wonderful. And you bring up a really great point that many of us before this pandemic had faced so many different challenges. If you could take a moment to just talk about where you all are in this pandemic, how are you doing? And talk about the challenges that you faced. What have been the biggest struggles for you during this time? Let's start with Ashley.
Yes. So in the beginning of this pandemic, I actually got all 4 of my wisdom teeth removed, which was a whole ordeal. My original appointment got rescheduled because in 5 minutes before the actual appointment, because they were like, oh, the surgeon's wife has a fever and he's rushing her to the hospital. And I'm like, I'm standing in the office, and was he working yesterday? Like, am I exposed to this? Now I'm about to sit with my mouth open for a couple of hours. Like, what's going on? But I was in a lot of pain. So it was actually an emergency surgery. So I went through that anyway. Just had faith that everything will be fine. I have asthma, so that's another issue onto that. So after that, just the healing process with my wisdom teeth. Then my birthday was the following week. So it was just a lot of emotions, but I'm generally a very positive person. That's what my whole motto is about. So I started out with this pandemic with this big bubble. I don't watch the news, I'm just praying for good energy and we'll get out of this on the right side, right? And then as the weeks went on, I felt like my bubble started moving closer into me, because I'm from New York, the center of this. And every time I went on Facebook, I saw another death, and it was usually friends' parents. And I've lost a parent before, so I know what that feels like. And it literally happened every day. I've lost count now. I feel like I'm at least at 15 people. And so just to have that 1 degree of separation of people who are losing people, it just became more real to me, and my positivity started to diminish because it started hitting home. And so I will talk through how I've been getting through that a little later. But right now I'm in the midst of trying to build my bubble back up and operate on this wavelength where I understand the pain and suffering that's happening, but at the same time, how can I find joy, and how can I support my loved ones who are here or my loved ones who are currently grieving?
Thank you so much, Ashley. And that is so difficult. So many different challenges, whether it is underlying health conditions, health of family, friends, knowing folks who have lost. I'm sure that's something that all of those are different challenges and anxieties that a number of us have. Ben, would you like to share?
Sure. Social distancing has been very difficult for me. I am an extrovert, and most of my jobs, that I've had really require me to go out and talk to people. So it's been very difficult staying in. One of my, I guess, greatest challenges, I think there's kind of 2. One is that I live with my parents, which is great. I'm super excited that I have that support. But I'm the type of person that, if possible, I want to go out and help others or help people with this, what's going on. But I definitely can't because I have to think about everybody else that it's in my household. So that's actually a concern. Another challenge that some people probably have experienced, or many people have experienced, is I just lost my job maybe, I think, 2 days ago. So at first I thought that, everything was fine. Like I was just, I was going to have my job, but then I just got a letter and it was just like, okay, you've been basically terminated. And that was very hard because it was a job that I really loved. And then I think for me, a huge challenge, and obviously this is the last thing, is that, like I said, I got my master's in public health. So when we're talking about like diseases and epidemiology, like I like knowing what's happening. I like knowing the number of people who are being affected by this virus. I want to know about the studies. And But, it gets to a point sometimes where it's very overwhelming. Like I have an academic hat, then it's just, I also have to realize that I need to take care of my own self. So stuff that I've been doing recently is I've sort of been distancing myself from like learning and reading constantly about this virus. So that's also been very helpful for me, and it's allowed me to remain present. And thankfully, like within this panel, we're going to talk about more strategies about these things. So I'm excited to talk about that as well.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ben. And Dr. Osa?
Yeah, I think for the social distancing is an issue and it's not an issue. And one way that it's been an issue is that our family is very, very tight. And we all regathered around Santa Cruz, which is already small, to be with each other. My mom is in a nursing facility, and both of my sisters have some issues with their health. And then we have a little niece that's 15 that lives here with us in the tribe or in the clan that has epilepsy. And then at 60, I was diagnosed again with malignant cancer, but I'm 65 now. So we're all like extra vulnerable in a way to this actual illness. At the same time, I think, again, spiritually, emotionally, politically, we've always collaborated and worked together. So somehow we still have to continue to stay in contact with our elder. Our mom's still here, for example, and our doctors and all of that. So in certain ways, we're kind of forced to go out just to stay alive, irregardless. At the same time, I bundle up as much as I can, try not to go out. But we've been very careful with putting all the gear and trying to, be safe. I think in Santa Cruz, there's a, even though people may think it's like a beach town, there's a lot of resistance to this type of politics in a way, and thinking that it's really just kind of made up, that it's not real. And, and then there's a large percentage of homeless folks here for the town. So even just going, say, to the corner to get some milk or something like that, there's a lot of people on the street still, and they're not protecting themselves. So I just walk down the middle of the street. I'm like, I'm not going to deal with all of this. So I have too much at stake myself. So in that way, I kind of get like just survivalist, like an animal instinct. It's either me or you. So I think all of our family's still doing that. So I don't know exactly how I would say that I'm really safe or not safe. It's hard to know, because a lot of people that are not being safe.
Well, and how many of you have folks in your immediate family or friends who are taking this in various levels of seriousness? So like, Ben, I saw you shaking your head yes. Are there folks in your life that you've had to kind of convince to actually take the calculated risks or take more precautions?
Absolutely. Thankfully, at least with my direct family, because of certain situations that we've had and my dad getting sick, I mean, it's pretty clear that we have to stay in. Like, I'm not going to go out and do stuff and then potentially get sick and get my father sick, and he's in a vulnerable spot in a vulnerable population, so I can't really do that. But then I know of some people who just don't see it as a problem, and they're young and they think that they're invincible and they're not going to get it. And it just sometimes gets really frustrating, because it's like you really need to look at the data, and oftentimes they don't want to look at it. They sort of want to, like, they have this idea that this is just not happening. They just don't want to believe it. So I definitely have had different experiences of, interacting with people and talking to them about like how to sort of like address what is happening with this virus.
Yeah, and it sounds like that has been a common experience for so many of us who have had folks taking this at various levels of seriousness. And it sounds like, it sounds like a very common problem, and it's something that adds anxiety for you as an individual to know that people that you know and love are either immunocompromised and going out, or someone in your family is, and that causes additional anxiety. So we've talked a little bit about all the various anxieties. Now, how have you all worked to manage that stress? Let's start with Ashley.
Yes. So a couple of ways I've worked to manage my stress is being honest with those around me about what I need. On top of all the deaths from COVID, I've also had people in my life with other health issues. So for example, my uncle had a minor stroke, and we just found out that my coworker was just diagnosed with a brain tumor, and before she had breast cancer. And so I've never experienced a coworker having cancer before, serious illness. So I had a conversation with my director saying, can I take tomorrow off? Because this is a lot, I'm on this conference call crying because I'm just so overwhelmed. And luckily I have people around me who embrace that and understand that. It's so funny. My director, our call was at 1 p.m. today, and she texted me at 6:30 like, hey, just wanted to check in and see how you were doing, because this happened today. She shared the news with us. So one thing is being honest with the people around you about what you need, whether that's a director saying, I need a day off, or whether that is friends and family saying like, I need more FaceTime with you, like FaceTimes, not like FaceTime, FaceTime through virtual ways or Zooms or whatever it is that you need. Just being honest with people. Another way that I have been trying to manage my anxiety is by creating. I'm a creator. If there's any creators in here, Benjamin, you have to be a creator. You have a website, like you're a creator. But if there's any other creatives in here, I've been learning how to paint through Skillshare. Skillshare has 2 months free, by the way. So if you want to use this time to learn something new and just, I don't know, there's something about creating something that just makes me feel proud. And in a time where the world is dark, we need to find some joy. So creating and sharing with people about what my needs are have been the top 2 things for me.
Yeah, Ashley, both of those resonate so much for me. First, because I think with the honesty, many of us are self-isolating with someone else. And so the expectations of what that looks like and what normal life looked like has changed. And so I think it's really important to communicate with your roommates or spouse or partner or whoever that is, what that new normal should look like. And so I'll share an example of when we first started this, I was cooking all the time. And it wasn't so much of we had a conversation and I was the one that was taking on the cooking. As soon as I started to realize and started to notice, hey, this is something that's happening and I'm taking on this emotional labor. I'm taking on this additional work that we didn't have to have before, because we ate most of our meals at work, in the office for breakfast, lunch, weren't having to figure out meal planning in the same way. As soon as I actually had that conversation and set some expectations and started to share that work, we had that conversation, and it has taken such a mental load off of my plate because I just had that conversation and communicated that. And I was honest with both myself as well as my partner. The other piece of being creative, my partner and I shared this with the group earlier, started a YouTube channel, and we've been doing that creating, and we come out with videos and have been trying to bring cheer to folks, as well as it has given us an outlet to be able to create and bring ourselves some mental health as well. So I completely resonate with both of those things. Other strategies for ways that you all have been coping. Ben?
I'll go. Yeah, so it's really interesting because I've never experienced so much anxiety. It's definitely a learning experience for me. And there's 3 things that I've been doing. I think one thing that as Gates scholars, we tend to be pretty ambitious, goal-oriented. And with what happened, losing my job and everything like that, I've sort of had to do everything in like small, like bite sizes. So I have all of these goals and there's a lot of competing priorities. But at the same time, I'm recognizing that because I'm going through some anxiety, I can't be super hard on myself. So I make sure to do like maybe one thing, right, a day. And that could be whether it's clean my room, that could be whether it's send an email to, the doctor program that I just got into, like just minor things. And then after that, I completely forget about it. I forget about all the other tasks that I have. And that may mean that I'm going to forget about it and play some video games, maybe play 3 hours, and I'm okay with that because we're in a situation right now where we have to figure things out. And then also, I think what's been very helpful has been talking to people. I see that some folks said that they are struggling, and something that's been very helpful for me is just, talking to my friends. That's been really helpful. Something about this virus and the fact that we're idle is that, I sort of recognize, even with myself, that I've been so busy that I haven't really been thinking about my own like mental health sometimes. And then now that I'm by myself, this idle time, it's kind of like a lot of things are coming in at one time. So it's been very helpful to just have friends there. There's also, I think the resources we'll talk, but, I called a hotline and not, anything super bad, but I did call a hotline and that was really helpful. So if you are kind of like struggling with some issue, just know that there are resources out there that can potentially at least mitigate some of the anxiety that you may be experiencing.
Ben, thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for being vulnerable and sharing how you did call a hotline. I think there's a stigma around mental health, and it doesn't necessarily mean that there is like something wrong with you. That's actually wonderful that you actually went out and reached out for support at a time when so many of us are experiencing this anxiety and not enough people are actually getting that support. So really appreciate that. I also loved how you talked about letting go, essentially. Self-care is super important, and knowing what you can take on, what you can't take on, knowing that about yourself sometimes is harder than even knowing that about others, and even communicating that with yourself. And then with talking, I think it's something so simple that we just need to talk to our friends, talk to each other. And with social distancing, we need to remember that we physically need to distance, but that doesn't mean that you have to social distance. You can still connect with people. And I can personally feel a huge difference between those days that I've been able to connect with folks and I haven't. So thank you for sharing that. Dr. Osa, would you like to share some strategies that have worked with you?
Yeah, I think one thing what I wanted to say is because I came in the inaugural year with GMS in 2000. And I think that coming into the new millennium and having that newness, which wasn't that long ago, really, 20 years, it may seem like it to some of you, half of your life or more. But I think that some things are still basic and the same. We were encouraged and promoted and even chosen in that way, selected through a rigorous process to use our intellect and to be to think outside the box, given that freedom, and yet to also enhance our cultural histories and herstories and our backgrounds and our cores, our roots. So that was really beautiful to always see that we were really allowed to be our native self, honored to be our African American self, honored to be our Asian American self, and all of that was, again, the foundation, the core, I feel, of GMS. At the same time, we have one brain. And I think that one thing I would like to say that I felt over these years is that the emphasis has been a lot on one hemisphere of the brain, developing that analytical, being extra sharp, on being innovative with the sciences and the math and our different types of social sciences. And what I'm trying to, which both of you have said as well, is that that creative element, I feel, is what's come up at this time in this pandemic and facing death in life. As I get older, it's becoming more clear. And the message, or again, the thought that I would like to share, or actually it's a challenge to the younger folks in GMS and the alumni, is that you really, really go into your creative self, go into your creative, this is a time, I think, that, history repeats itself. History happens for different reasons. I won't get into all of that, but I think that it is a time, it's a magical time to really face your creative, use your creative side of your brain. And that means being vulnerable, which we all are feeling right now. It's an animal instinct. And letting that out, letting that be your paint, letting that be your music to your new dance, letting that be your, an idea for a mural in your room or some sketch. You don't have to share it with everyone. But one thing, this is the last thing I'm going to say real quick. One thing that kind of just came kind of organically, I'm here in California in Santa Cruz, so I have to use that. It kind of came in that way, was the idea that people all over wanted to express themselves. And I have a lot of friends that are professors and professionals and scientists and all of that, but they have a hard time to really release your emotions. And I think that this is a perfect time to make ourselves deal with that. And if it's writing a journal, like you were saying, Benny, even if it's one thing a day, you just put that little 10 minutes down and write about our history, write about our ancestors, write about our dreams, because we will, those of us that continue on, we will get past this. The dust will settle and it will be a new world. But this is the time that we have to sit down or lay down or do what you need to do to really express yourself. They said that back in the 60s, express yourself and be proud of it. We're not going by it. Mental health, it's what you define it. Mm-hmm. Everyone's a poet. You know what I'm saying? So I'm saying play a bit in this, find some release in that way.
That's great. Osai, I love that. Really tapping into your creativity, and even if you don't share it, even if you don't want to share it with the world, post on Facebook, Instagram, Snap, all of these things, you don't need to share it to really tap into that and use this as a reflective time to really get to know your emotions, get to know those feelings and all of that. I think Ashley has one more comment, but before that, I want to let folks know that we'll start taking questions from the audience. So if you do have any questions, feel free to post those in the Zoom webinar chat or in this nifty Q&A icon that you have here on the bottom. And so, yeah, we'll open the floor for questions after Ashley's comment.
No, I just love what both Ben and Dr. Osa said. Ben, you were mentioning, or I'd play video games. So I'm probably older than a lot of people here, but The Sims, I grew up on The Sims. And I have to admit, I bought The Sims at the beginning of the quarantine because I was like, you know what? I'm just going to sit here and spend some hours. So the first block of my quarantine time was very unproductive, just video games, mostly laying in bed because I was, recuperating from my wisdom teeth. But don't feel pressure to do something. If binge watching All American on Netflix is what you would like to do, I suggest it. That's another thing I did. Go ahead and do that because I know that there is this, there's this thing going around where people are saying like, this is the time to start a business, to do this, to do that. And that's great for some people who have the mental capacity to do that, but not all of us do. Like I said, my first 2 months, I guess you can say, of this time was totally unproductive. And I'm trying to balance unproductive with productive, but that's just what works for me. Like in May, I'm starting like mental health month and, sharing resources and going back to my YouTube channel, but that's because I've been in a bed for the past 2 months, you know? So really finding what that balance looks like for you, because it might be full productive, it might be full binge watching, and don't feel ashamed of that. Just walk in that and do what you feel like is best for you.
Yeah, Ashley, that's a great point. I think what we should all realize is that this is a pandemic, and we are all going through a collective trauma in many ways. And so whatever that looks like for you, that may be different, but recognize that and be kind to yourself while you're going through that. I think we have one more comment from the panel, and then we'll open up for questions.
Yeah, I like the fact that you mentioned collective trauma, because I think what's really important in these times is also to potentially remove distractions. Because of what is happening, many of you, I have myself, may experience triggers. I mean, right now in the mental health world, we say stressors, but triggers are real. And if you're on social media and certain things are really bothering you, it may be wise to potentially, put it aside and remove that distraction. So addressing your triggers, I think, is going to be really helpful also during this process, because it can get very overwhelming. And sort of like what I was saying, if you're, if you have those stressors and you're on idle time, it's all going to pile up at once, right? So just, making sure that you recognize like what is sort of triggering you or what is creating the stressor, and potentially removing that distraction if that is possible.
Ben, that is so true. There are certain politicians that I cannot read an article that has that person in it, because that is a trigger for me. And I've really had to limit my news and social media, and it has done wonders for my mental health. It's amazing. So let's go to our first question. This attendee says, "Thank you all for joining us today. Great to see such beautiful beings. I'd love to get more insight into how you handle the guilt of privilege during this time. A lot of us are lucky to have a stable job right now. How we cope with this survivor's guilt that some of us are experiencing." So would love to hear how you cope with the survivor's guilt of being able to have some of that privilege.
For me, Dr. Osa, you want to jump in?
Oh, go on, Ashley. You go. You go.
I was just going to say, for me, I've been giving monetarily, because my church also goes out and actually provides meals and does a lot of in-person service that I wish I could do, but because of my asthma and other conditions, I physically would be putting myself in danger. So since I do have a job, and I know some people don't at this moment, I have been giving more to different organizations, to local organizations. We just gave away like 30 bags of clothing. So I've been giving, and that's how I've been dealing with it. I don't know if that's the best way. If you have a better suggestion, please let me know, because that is real. It's definitely real, and I feel it.
That's great. Dr. Osa, did you have something?
Yeah, what I was going to say was that, first of all, I try not to feel the guilt. I think, like my sister says, for myself, it's a wasted emotion. I'd rather, use that emotion or that energy in a different way, or channel it in a different way. I think that for me, there seems to be not enough time as you get older, at least again, I'm just speaking from my own self, and seeing some of my friends, or who I call my community, and that's Gates Scholars, alumni, and my blood familia, and my extended familia in that way. I don't see that privilege. I feel like I've donated a lot of my life to working with other folks in prisons and juvenile halls, people that have been, quote unquote, out of the normal mental health, mental wealth situation. And so I think that, again, the idea of creativity, and it's not like a chore or an assignment or a job. It's that I realized in this world that in a patriarchal, ethno-androcentric European model, linear thinking, that we still haven't privileged that other side of the brain, the other ways that people have survived for many, many years. And I think that, again, it's a good time to at least start to question that, not as homework, but as a survival skill, something that we haven't been taught or tried or encouraged to do. It's kind of abstract, but in the real sense, it's pushing yourself, like Ben, you were saying, to acknowledge some of the issues that we have, whether you do it publicly or privately, and also as far as community goes, I think that this is one of the greatest forums that Gates have, the web, the internet, and putting all of us together, encouraging that a lot of people can create together. We don't have to, again, be that isolated. We haven't used these tools to the max yet. And that's some of the things that I think with the brains and the mental wealth that we have is a good way to get to stronger mental health. Okay.
That's great. Thank you so much, Dr. Osa. Ben, did you want to add anything?
Oh no, it was for the next question.
Oh, sure.
Mm-hmm.
I will also just add to the advice around survivor's guilt real quick. That was actually something that I was definitely feeling in the very beginning of all of this. And as I mentioned, California has been dealing with this pandemic for about 2 months now, a full 2 months. And when I first was hearing about all of this death and loss and everything that was going on, and I'm sure a number of you were also kind of thinking, like, what can I do? What can we do during all of this? And so a few things. So because I live in California and we had wildfires a few years in a row, we actually had some masks, and we had some leftover masks that hadn't been used. And we kept a few for ourselves that had been used. But we were able to donate some masks to the Santa Clara Foundation, the hospital foundation. So that was one thing that I was like, okay, this is a direct impact. These masks are going to someone that may not have PPE. This could be their opportunity to get PPE. I made a pact with my husband that we would do takeout. We would do some delivery each week so that we could support some local businesses. And because we both still have our jobs, we're able to do that and support local businesses in the area. So hopefully they're less impacted. A few other things that we've been doing is thinking of ways that we can support folks. And so we did a fundraiser. Through our YouTube channel. We did a fundraiser and raised about $1,200 through that fundraiser to directly to the CDC Foundation. And that was just by sharing the first look of our parodies, songs, kind of having a little bit of a music concert so that we could get people aware of this thing in the very beginning and feel like we were able to do something. And I would just implore all of you to think about the things that you can control and think about the things that you can't control. Because what you can't control, like guilt is something you can somewhat control, right? But what helps with that guilt is to know what are the things that you are actually able to do, and take that guilt and use that energy to go out and do those things. Maybe not out, but go and do those things, right? And so totally love those comments, love these questions coming in. Please continue to send these questions. So next question. Right now, I'm in a situation where I need to move from my college residence to my summer residence, and I'm struggling to find motivation to pack and be productive. What advice would you give to help people find motivation to complete necessary tasks during a pandemic? So this is someone who is having some trouble being present or being able to commit to these tasks because of, I think, maybe some of that collective trauma that we talked about earlier. So who would like to answer this question?
I got it. So I think for me, what I've been doing is I've been reframing my ideas of productivity, right? So for me, what previously could have potentially be seen as unproductive has sort of become productive. So, for example, I like watching Charmed, for example. That's one of my favorite shows. And I needed to clean my room and do a lot of other stuff. So what I did is I was watching Charmed and I was cleaning my room at the same time. And that is totally fine. So I think right now, because there's so much, I guess, chaos, right? Like we don't really know what's going to happen in like 2 3 months. We don't even know how this virus is going to be affecting us in a couple of years. We still don't know. So I think reframing what our ideas of productivity is could potentially be helpful in sort of addressing a strategy of feeling like you're not being productive. No, you are being productive if you are being unproductive, if that makes sense.
Other folks.
I was going to say, I totally agree with you, Ben. That's what I was thinking earlier for one of the comments is not to use the same terms that we used before. This is the time to free our minds, to free our hearts, not to be so hard on ourselves. Stay alive. That's the goal. Stay alive. And as we do, I trust that GMS Alumni Association, all of us and our extended people will also be concerned with those around us, sharing love, what we have. And if we don't have love, then that's okay. It's okay to redefine at this moment all of that. What, like you're all saying, the new norm, this is part of our task, to change those words, to change those concepts, not to be so hard, to see healing in a different way. Even just basic healing, just sitting there and learning how to breathe again. That simple thing of just breathing, taking a few seconds to yourself to just learn, hear a meditation tape. I have two men that I really love and know, and they're like, I can't sit that long. I can't sit still like that. And I said, you know what? That was before, when you were doing this 60 hours, a week work and bringing home some work too on top of that. So rethink all of that. Give yourself, like you said, binging, watching TV, to me, that's like, looking at film, looking at movies, looking at our stories and seeing how our own narratives fit into the bigger picture. So again, that's part of the creative side of our thinking. And we need to go there a little bit more, not as homework, but just as love.
I think I'll just add also, I think it's really important during this time. We play so many different roles when the world is not going through a pandemic. I think it's really important to know realistically and ask yourself realistically, what can or should you be accomplishing right now? What are the things that are really important, and maybe you need to seek some support. Maybe you need to ask a friend, ask a family member to support you in accomplishing some of these goals. Maybe there are things that don't need to be done right now. Obviously, moving from your college residence to a summer residence may be something that you have a strict deadline, but who are the folks that you can work with? Who can you get support with into some of those things? Realistically, ask yourself that. And some of the strategies that I found is time blocking, being able to pack for an hour and pack, like Ben was saying, pack while you're watching Charmed, multitask. So it doesn't even feel like you're really packing. You're doing something that you love while you're also packing. Time blocking really helps to kind of remove distractions as well. But just remember, and this also goes with another question that's coming up, you can't be everything to everyone. And especially right now, you cannot be everything to everyone all the time. And I think a lot of us feel the need to do that. I know we're right at the hour. And so I want to let y'all know that we are going to continue answering some of your questions for the next probably 10, 20 minutes or so. So feel free to continue asking questions. And if you do need to drop off, we totally understand, but our panelists have been very gracious with their time and are allowing us some more time to be able to answer your questions. So this next question is also very similar to the earlier one of survivor's guilt. I've tried to help friends who have lost jobs. However, it doesn't feel like I'm doing enough. I feel an obligation to do something bigger. So how do you handle this burden of saving the world if you feel it also?
An idea.
Yeah, Dr. Osa.
Yeah, I want to maybe let me be a little bit more concrete. I think I have many friends that just lost jobs in Hollywood. That, I mean, just from A to Z, professor friends, everything's like, obviously, we all know how the world is right now. I think, again, this sounds really basic, but just to keep breathing and acknowledging, giving thanks that you're alive to start with. Reaching out to other people if you need to, whatever form that we have. This is the GMS alumni. There are people from all of our schools. We have friends that we went into classes with together. There's people here, there's resources here. Obviously, they're even going to send us a printed sheet of resources. But in the specific, I think like the person that needs to move, if you can, and you could do that. I mean, I think people could do that. You can go get counseling. You could do it over the phone, whatever. But you also could change your channel, like boom. You could change your channel and say, wow, this is a new world. This is a new world. And me being able to have the privilege to move to a new place this summer, that's going to be exciting. You know, I think part of that is to acknowledge that, see that side, even if you go through the steps. Like Ben was saying, and you're cleaning your room. Nobody likes to clean their room, but you know, it's partly attitude, and that's part, I think, of you know, you have the power of that. You have the power to work with that a bit and turn that poison, turn that negativity into some positive. And just keep.
What you're saying is really leaning into the things that you are grateful for. So maybe you're excited about going to that summer residence. Maybe you're excited about making this change. Or there are other things that really give you hope or positivity, like leaning into that. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That sounds good.
Other folks?
Dance with it.
Dance with it. I love it. I love it. All right, I have a few different questions, some in the webinar chat, some in the Q&A, but let's answer this one question. How do you cope with sudden or unconscious anxiety?
Yeah, so my question back to you, Nancy, was, is there something that triggers that anxiety, or do you just feel it all of a sudden, which I guess is what you're speaking about. But for me, I mean, Dr. Osa has said it a couple of times, but breathing exercises really have been helpful. But really finding the source of what triggers that anxiety. Like for me, example, I love public speaking. I love talking to people. I love helping people, but I still deal with anxiety before every speaking engagement. Like right now, I feel like my bladder is about to burst, even though I used the restroom 15 times before this. And I realized that I'm just feeling that way, but it's not real. I know in my head that I don't actually have to use the restroom, but for me, anxiety shows up in that way. So I have to consciously remind myself, Ashley, you actually don't have to use the restroom. You're just nervous about speaking. Everything is going all right. And it's okay. I literally have to play words in my head to combat what's happening in my body, and eventually the feeling goes away. I mean, it's been an hour. I still feel like I have to use the restroom, but I haven't bolted off because I know that that's anxiety trying to present itself as something real. So figuring out what those triggers are for you. For me, it's public speaking, and then also finding an internal script that you can say to yourself to combat that. And then also, I can't remember what I was going to say. If you find out the trigger though, you can kind of prevent it like I know that this happens every time I publicly speak, so I use the restroom before that so I can tell myself that it's a lie. So it's really about digging deep to figure out what that all looks like. So I hope that helps. And if you need more, definitely feel free to reach out to me directly.
Isn't the body an amazing thing? Thank you so much for sharing that, Ashley. I will also add something someone told me once around anxiety is ask yourself the question when you do have these thoughts or feelings and they become actions and actual visceral reactions from your body, ask yourself the question, do you have evidence for that? If you're having this feeling that this pandemic is never going to end, do we have evidence for that? Because it will. This is temporary. And we don't know how long it will go on, but we do know that this can't go on forever. And so let's think about some of those questions. Think about, once again, what you can control, what you can't, really leaning into gratefulness. These are all different strategies to support us and support ourselves and really be kind to yourself during this difficult time. Now, we'd like to go to a question from the Facebook page. So next question is, what advice do you have for finding internships during a pandemic?
I can take this one because one of my best friends is struggling with this. I think there's two things we have to recognize. One thing is the pandemic has really created, I guess some form of economic collapse, right? So there some internships now that may not be available that probably were available 2 or 3 months ago strictly because of what's happening now. I think the advice that I have and what I've told my friend, and it's actually worked out, is really going, if there is an internship that you really are interested in and this is the company that I want to work for, then I would directly send them an email. I think that will be helpful. I think there's also some programs, for example, I know if you live with a disability, you can go on limeconnect.com and they have particular resources for that. So you could probably email them. And there's an application that you have to go through, but they also have some resources. So in general, because, you have to realize it may be very difficult to get an internship this year, just in general, because of what's happening with the pandemic. So don't be super hard on yourself if you're really struggling with the internship, because, a lot of us are in this state of uncertainty and we just don't know what's going to happen in 2 to 3 months from now. But just in general, I would just go to the direct website and then send an email to whomever is in charge. And then I think that would be the best way of going about it.
I will also add that a number of companies are doing virtual internships this year, so they may not be completely canceling internships. So check in with the companies, as Ben was saying, and if you know someone, if you have a contact at that company, it is great to continue networking, even though you may not be able to go to that happy hour or go to that networking event. Still continue to try networking via LinkedIn, as well as email and other forms. Great. So we have a few different questions on the ways that folks are social isolating. So talking about a grad student that has a lot of friends and left campus to quarantine, to be able to quarantine with their family. Their family lives pretty far away and they chose to make the trip to potentially keep others from getting the virus. Also, being a member of the LGBTQ community, they didn't feel comfortable staying home with a religiously conservative parent, but as a consequence, they are physically alone 90% of every day. So any of you have experience with choosing to be alone when others didn't? How did you deal with it? Osa, it looks like you're speaking, but you are on mute. So there you go.
Oh, okay. I wasn't exactly sure about the question. Was it one LGBTQIABC person that was staying at home and the parents are real religious and they're at home a lot? Is that
So
what?
it looks like they have chosen to social distance, but they didn't feel comfortable staying home with a religiously conservative parent, but they also wanted to social distance. And so as a consequence, they've chosen to physically be alone 90% of the day. So do any of you have experience? I think
Well,
there have been a few questions about folks who are just struggling because they are completely alone.
I think there's friends that I know all over, and I don't know if that's what you like to do or want to do, but I see a lot of friends that are still connecting over the internet. Doing that, they're dancing. Somebody just had a birthday party, and usually they have a huge birthday party, and they decided to do it, on the computer. And same thing, they danced for a certain period of time. They had their, I think that's what people are doing right now, right? And again, I want to just go back to this. I'm gonna keep staying focused on this one thing. The thing about writing journals, especially for somebody that's really alone a lot, writing a daily journal, even though it might sound wild, but it's not your homework. It's not like what somebody has assigned you to do at school. It's yourself, and it's dealing with your other self. And so even getting a job, like you said, doing the internship and stuff, that allows you to redefine what we're even seeing as finance and economics and all of that type of world, what we're even seeing as work. What's that going to look like to you? And we need this time. We should, take this time right now to do some soul searching and rethink, okay, well, I wanted that internship, but what might be second closest to it? That doesn't mean you're dead. That just means, okay, maybe I'll do plan B. I thought I was going to go over here making educational media, and I end up doing some fundraising for this school or something like that, getting whatever it is. I'm just saying that we have to rethink the type of labor or work that we're going to get involved in right now. And the partying part and being isolated, I think again that people are doing it. I've seen a lot together. I'm just learning. Even here, I see 4 people, and we're all in different places. There's people from your previous schools. There's friends that you grew up. I mean, there's ways to find people also that that's part of our community. And I think, again, that's part of our task right now when we have the energy to make ourselves vulnerable. And that's the new world I believe we need to work together to go into,
This is
not
great.
like we were before, real isolated.
Yeah. And for folks who are on the webinar chat, Ashley has also posted some really great resources, from Netflix Party to House Party to Jackbox games, lots of different opportunities to connect with folks. And the beauty of all of this is you don't have to be in the same location. Just the other day, my partner and I connected with friends from Atlanta that we hadn't been able to connect with because we didn't have the time before. We didn't have the same location or schedules. And with the time zone difference, that had been much more difficult before. So all of the ways that Ashley mentioned in the chat are great opportunities for folks to be able to connect, even if you are completely by yourself. Ben, did you have something to add?
Yeah, so I sort of wanted to address the LGBTQ issue and also another thing. So I was talking about support groups. NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, they have, and we're going to send I think we've already sent the resources, but you're going to get a document after this anyways. And they have support groups if you are if you live with a mental illness and live with depression, anxiety, and you're really having some issues with this time, they've gone to an online format. And then the Trevor Project they have a hotline, and they focus on LGBTQ issues. And then there's also a trans line that is particular for people who are either non-binary or trans, and or even questioning So there are also resources that are particular to the LGBTQ community. So if you are struggling, I'm pretty sure, especially within that issue, if you were to call the hotline, they probably have ways to sort of help you navigate, this time, the quarantine. So maybe you could look into those resources.
Great, thank you all. So we have two more questions. The next one is, thank you all so much for this panel. For me, my question is, how do you suggest we cope with the uncertainty of not having a job? I stay positive, but it can be scary to wonder when we will go back to normal.
So I am trying to remove my Q&A box, sorry. So I acknowledge that I am speaking from a place of privilege, being a person who has a job currently. And I would like to invite whoever that person is to reach out to me through my email. It's in there. It's also don'tdieafraid@gmail.com, because the second week of May, myself and a couple of other of my business partners are actually hosting a 3-day seminar where we're going over resume reviewing and interviewing tips, and really having one-on-one sessions with people to just build up those skill sets, because I know it's especially scary right now to not have a job, but I remember graduating from grad school with my master's of public health and not having a job for 8 months, and it was still scary. Like, you have to realize that no matter when you don't have a job, it's still scary. Yes, it might seem scarier right now, but there is a time over this hill, even though we can't see it right now. So definitely reach out to me so I can send you the information about that event. 2, reaching out to your network. So I don't know if you're all already on LinkedIn or whatever professional sites you're on, but I know people who are getting hired now just because of the connections that they have. So don't undermine those, and reach out to your community if you have one. I don't want to assume that everyone has a community. And if you don't have one, GMS is the perfect place to start. We support our scholars the best way we know how. So if you feel like you don't have your own network that you can reach out to for that help, definitely, reach out to us.
I can answer that question too. I mean, I'm coping with it actually right now because I lost my job 2 days ago. So it's been very difficult. I am living with my family, so I am, I guess speaking somewhat in a place of privilege. But I will tell you something. I'm sort of just trying my best to relax because a lot of people are in very similar situations. If you just lost your jobs, I don't know what situation you're in, but I know you could potentially qualify for unemployment. I know it's been really, really slow. Like, I still haven't gotten my unemployment check, so it's been really slow. So there's that. Also, I think I've been using this time to figure out what other skills I do have. Right, there's a program, or it's a website called Fiverr. It's Fiverr. It's kind of like, let's say, like, I specialize in like cover letters, resumes, and college applications, and I've gotten hits once in a while, and I've been able to help people out and get paid for doing cover letter, resume, and sometimes an application. So I'm trying my best to find other ways, but I'm still right now coping with it because it's real. I mean, this is real. I think I had this assumption, and I guess it was premature, that everything was going to be fine. I thought I was keeping my job, and next thing you know, boom. So if possible, try to look for other opportunities. It's very difficult, but look at Fiverr, see if that can help out, or even Upwork. That's another one. Fiverr and Upwork, exactly. So those are really good resources if you have a skill. But I mean, I'm coping with it right now, so it's difficult. I understand.
Yeah. A number of these anxieties are coming from folks and their financial situation. So thank you so much for the question, and thank you all for your responses. We have another question on family dynamics. So I had to move back with my family because of the pandemic, and I've had a very hard time adjusting with this change in lifestyle. I haven't lived with my family for 5 years, and having to deal with dynamics that I haven't been exposed to for a while has really been a struggle. Are there any tips on getting through this situation? And I,
Dr. Rosa
Oh,
Hassan.
Ashley, want to go?
oh,
You
go,
want to
go ahead, Dr. Osa.
go after you? Oh, okay. Well, I wanted to address the family thing is because, you know, we have all the drama in the world. And I said my mom is in a nursing facility. So, you know, in one way, she's on the front lines right now of being, you know, those that have lost seniors already or are elders. And it's an awful way that she's going. And so we're working on a film about a movie called Lola. And even though all of our family still has issues, we still hang together because I think one is, again, you know, it's going to that breathing thing, allowing everyone to be themselves. I know that sounds simplistic, but the more and more you practice it, I learned this in therapy, you know, look at, say the color blue and look at 5 things that are blue before you react, you know, and that gives you that one beat or that one moment to regain yourself. Do that 1, 2, 3 breathing. The world is not going to end because you took that extra time. At least we don't think so right now. And I think that, again, doing the journaling, this is a good time that I thought a lot of us, especially the Gates folks, are you know, all of us that went through the programs, that we, and that are still here, that we take this time to record our history, to document our stories, to document our legacies, our family histories, and find out who we come from. You know, I think with all the brains, the collective brains here and our hearts, that this is a pivotal time to look, to do that soul searching. And even though we have our own conflicts within our own selves, to talk and have those discussions and argue with ourselves even, you know, to do that with each family member. If you need to go away, like everyone's saying, go away for a minute and go in your own corner. If, you know, people live together, 20 people in one house, in one space. I lived in my van for 7 years. So I give thanks that I'm in senior affordable housing. And all the places are really tiny. But we have to rethink our ideas about economics, our ideas about family, our ideas about community and work. You know, we had our mindset on this kind of work and this kind of job and this kind of internship. You know, well, it's not happening. So how do you move on? I have a house that I'm going to move to this summer because I have you know, start school over there. Well, that's really great. You're going to start school, you know, start packing the boxes and put on a smile. This is the way I've gotten through a few bouts of malignant cancer and a lot of other issues we don't have time to go into. But I'm still here, I'm still smiling, and I'm sending you all love to find your ways and continue as we do to help others, whether it has a price tag, whether you're getting paid for it or not, you know, and staying alive. That's our job, I think, as human beings. And for the Gates folks, again, I'm challenging us all to, if we're dealing with family and we had so much independence, well, this is the time. Ask your parents, ask your people, what did they do when they were kids? Who were their people before them? And before them, what do they remember? Write it down. Mm-hmm. Those would be beautiful documents for our all our group to have and the world to know as well. We're writers and we're literate. So some of that stuff are different ways to be creative and think about what we're doing here and how we're going to move past to the next step together. So I have a lot of expectations for us all. And, you know, you asked this grandma to come aboard. So I'm just saying, you know, I got in 2000, and even the GMS changed some rules after the first year. You know, it was undergrads. I came in as a grad student. So even that changes. And so we're doing that now again. Mm-hmm. This is the ball's here, and we got to move with it, you know?
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much, Osa.
Thank
Actually,
you.
you have something you wanted to add to this question?
Yeah. I loved what Dr. Osa said, especially accepting people. My background is both of my parents were substance users, so I was raised by my grandmother, and my mother's substance use was very much in my household, in the front of my face. She would disappear for 5 months, 6 months at a time. We wouldn't know where she was. So growing up, I didn't realize that that was trauma. I just knew that as my life, like that was normal to me. And then when I would tell people and they'd be shocked, I'd be like, what's wrong with you? Like, this is my life. And then I became an adult and I realized, oh, that's actually very traumatic. And when I became an adult and I was back in those situations where my mother would break promises after, you know, being away from at college, like you said, you've been gone from your house for 5 years. I had to realize as an adult, because I don't know how old you are asking this question, but you're somewhere up there. The way I found peace with my mother's addiction and with my cousin who also lived with us, who is an alcoholic, was I had to understand her. I had to understand the trauma she went through to get her to her addiction. So I don't know what the family dynamics are in your house, but realizing that our parents aren't perfect, our siblings aren't perfect, our guardians, whoever you're living with, they aren't perfect. We were raised to believe that they have some common sense because they created us and they're responsible for us, but that's actually not necessarily true because there could have been a lot of things along their journey that they didn't learn. And so once you have grace for people and you have a greater understanding of where they're coming from, it allows you to be less mad and to harbor less animosity towards them. You actually start to feel sorry for them because you're like, wow, like now I get it. I can see you as a human being and I don't put you on a pedestal anymore. And that quite honestly freed me from a lot of the annoyances that I used to have with my mom. I'm not going to say it's perfect. She still annoys me sometimes to this day, but it's definitely way easier when you have that understanding. And on top of that, I know it's hard to create space in this. I don't know if your house is overcrowded and you feel like you can't find a space, but if you can't physically find a space in your house, luckily it's May, so no matter where you are in the country, the weather should be getting a little nice-ish. So looking up some parks and some places physically in nature that you can be distant from your home and distant from others but still safe is definitely some of my suggestions. And once you go to those distant places, bringing activities that you love with yourself. For me, it's adult coloring books, and I use markers, not crayons, because crayons aren't dark enough. So yeah.
Ashley, that was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I think you made so many good points about really accepting people. It sounded like forgiveness was one of those things. And just knowing that people are only capable of loving you in the way that they're able to. And we're not going to be able to change those folks. I think this is a little bit of a tricky question to answer because we don't know exactly the situation or the scenario, but I really appreciate you all coming at it from two different perspectives. I'm going to end our session tonight on this last question because I just love it. It's very simple, and it's from Trayvon Thomas. How are y'all tending to your spirit? And I just love this because this is really what this whole conversation is about. How are we taking care of ourselves, and how are we tending not only to our body and our physical needs of sleep and eating and all of those like Maslow's hierarchy basic needs, but how are you really tending to the mental health, the spirit inside you? I can go ahead and share that a game changer for me was, I don't know if y'all have heard of Brene Brown. I love her. I think she's wonderful. Brene, if you're listening, you're great. She is a psychologist that talks about shame and vulnerability, and recently came out with a podcast called Unlocking. And it is an amazing podcast. It actually happened to come out right around the time that we all started social distancing in this pandemic. So I know we've all shared a lot of great tips tonight, but I will just leave with, if you haven't heard that podcast, that's a great one. We'll put it in the resource doc. And I'll let the panelists also share how are y'all tending to your spirit. Ben, would you like to start us off, or Dr. Osai? I see you came off.
No, let Ben, you want to say something?
You can go first. I'm still trying to
Okay.
really
Oh,
formulate
yeah,
the right.
what was that?
I think you can go ahead, Osa.
Okay. What I was thinking, in my life, I'm 65 now, and I think that I've lived a very full life. I give thanks. I give thanks all the time for being alive every day. I think that having that kind of cancer at 15 made me realize at that early age that it's kind of a miracle that I'm even still alive and dealing with some of the things that we've had to go through. I know all of us have our stories, but one thing in the here and now, in my immediate space and time, is that it's so magnificent to witness, even if it's on the computer or via friends, or that moment that I see all these birds fly, or an animal that I haven't seen going down the streets. But this is happening all over the world. For one moment, we see clear skies in China, or we see clear waters in Venice, as they said, or we're seeing the sea turtles that are almost extinct have 70,000 babies, or, all these magnificent things that it's like we humans have to sit back for a minute and check out. At least I am like, whoa, nature. And I'm going to gender it. I'm old school, Mother Nature, Mother Earth is speaking up as well. And the power of nature coming forth when we're in such an array of chaos and stupidity, just so much, hurting children, locking up children, taking children away from brand new babies away from their parents and putting them in cages in front of our eyes, televised live. We're dealing with those two dichotomies. But then again, that's why I'm saying our brain, we're one spirit, we're one brain. And that's what I have faith on. And that's what I love about life. And I give thanks all the time to be alive. And I think that's the spirit that, I might be essentialist or whatever people say, but, I'm not the only one that thinks like this. I know people have thought like this for different philosophies and centuries. So there are others that are going through similar things that we are. We're not the only ones dealing with this, period. Thank you. I love you all still. Thank you. This was
so much, Osa. Ashley, I saw you got up and got some books, it looks like.
Yeah, I did. I was like, I hope they don't think I ran to the bathroom. No, not ran to the bathroom. I went to get some books so I don't butcher their names. So this is a very quick read called The Greatest Miracle in the World by Og Mandino that I am reading. And then this one is called Well Read Black Girl. So it started out as a virtual book club, and they're very popular on Instagram. And then the founder of it actually put together this anthology of some dope female women writers and different short stories. So I've honestly been reading more. Podcasts aren't really my thing just because I'm so visual. So I'm like, either give me a video with all the visuals or give me the book and I can create the visuals in my mind. So I've just been finding more time to just sit on my bed and read and just like escape that way, because as I read, I just picture all the things in my head. So that's another way that you can be creative and escape your current situation.
I love that. And I love that that takes you away from screens as well, because we're all looking at screens so much these days. So love that you have the hardcover books. That's wonderful. Ben, would you like to share how you're tending to your spirit?
Sure. I mean, I tend to I tend to be a person that's just very pragmatic, and for me is therapy. That's very helpful, because sometimes if I'm very anxious or if I'm going through a lot, I know that at least, the next day I can sort of talk about it with a professional and I'll be okay for the most part. So that's been helpful. Also, sitting down and reading sort of like what Ashley said. That's been very helpful. I'm reading this book now. It's kind of, I don't know if the right term is nerdy, but it's called Bottle of Lies. And it's basically about pharmaceutical companies and how I'm not trying to get super political, but in general, there are issues with, I'm in the healthcare industry, and there are issues with like generic drugs and brand drugs. And that's even an issue that I've had to deal with, sort of like waiting on my medication to come in that from like Canada. So there's a lot of different things. So just reading about that has been very helpful. And then also really, I mean, I know it sounds kind of weird, but like what's really been helping me throughout this entire time as well is just being able to escape and just play video games has been very helpful. It really has. I mean, it's just been amazing. Just finally being able like to play all the games that I bought that I never finished, and I'm like, okay, I actually get to finish this. Like I was so busy before, now I can actually finish this game. So that's been very helpful as well.
That's great, Ben, and thank you for sharing that. Sometimes just getting away and doing something mindless. For me, it's puzzles. I like to do some puzzles where I don't have to think about anything else except for what's going on in front of me. I would like to thank the panelists tonight. Thank you all so much for joining us and sharing your various stories and strategies and tips around resilience, for well-being, for self-care, your various stories around appreciation and gratefulness during this time. We're all just doing the best we can in whatever situation that we're in. So I want to just remind everybody that we are in this together, and this is temporary. So before we close, Brianna has a few things to say, but I just want to say thank you again for allowing me to moderate. And I hope that everyone here just takes care of themselves, and we're going to get through this.
I have no sound. Sorry about that, guys. Reba, you took the words out of my mouth. First, I wanted to start by saying thank you, Ben, Ashley, Dr. Osabe, Reba. Thank you guys so much for your time. This was a really, really great program, and I am absolutely confident that everybody who is watching this right now truly appreciate you guys taking this time to sit down and to participate and work with us to create such a safe space for our scholars to, ask these questions and to hear from other scholars. We're all people. So anyone who's watching this, send jazz hands and loving thoughts with all of our panelists in mind. I'm sure they will definitely appreciate that. And I do want to, keep going with what Reba said, because that's exactly, what we're trying to do, as an association in general. We are a family, a GMS family. We're some of the best family out there. And like Reba said, a great community. I've been monitoring the chats, and I've been seeing people talking to each other and, sharing resources. And really that's what it's all about. And both at the chapter level and at the national level, we're working very, very hard right now to make sure that we are creating these opportunities for us to get together, and whether it's having serious conversations like we're having now, or having more fun programming. We're looking for ways for us to come together as a community, no matter where we are, all over the nation, because we really are all over the nation. With that said, we really do appreciate any feedback that you guys can provide us. As we are, an alumni association that's starting to get off the ground, we're doing a lot of R&D, research and development. So your feedback really does matter to us. If you look in the chat right now, we've dropped a link for feedback. It's a feedback form, and also there you can find the resources that our wonderful panelists have compiled, so you guys can reference that after today. And whether it's something fun to do or reading, definitely read that. I'm sure you'll find something that will help you to get past these times that we're in, because don't forget, we will get past this. It's only temporary. I do want to go ahead right now as well. I'm going to copy and paste into the chat a list of all our social media handles. Social media is a great way for you to stay in the loop as to what's going on with the association. I've included here the Instagram accounts, some Facebook groups for each region, and also for the Alumni Association in general. Definitely find your region there, and it's a private group, so make sure you join because a lot of it's going to be more specialized. But when it comes to Instagram, I am all for saying follow all the chapters because you never know where your life is going to take you post-pandemic. You might be traveling to Atlanta, you might go to San Diego for fun or for business, and there might be a GMS event that's happening in the area, and we would love to have you there, and you can connect with scholars wherever you are. And then finally, I do want to point out that we have a couple of events coming up this week from the Alumni Association. If you look at the flyer that's posted now, we have something happening in New York. It is an East Coast type of happy hour happening on Thursday the 30th, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It's kind of like a happy hour celebrating April birthday. So if that's you, or if you just want to connect, that's the time to do it. Grab a little drink, grab a slice of cake, and just be around other GMS scholars in the area. And then on Friday, May 1st, we are having a West Coast happy hour. I don't know if any of our watchers and listeners are out from the West Coast. Hey, hope to see you there. It's going to be this Friday at 5 p.m. We'll be sending out the Zoom link once you have RSVP'd. We're going to post that tomorrow. It's going to be myself, the GMS LA chapter president, Novian, who is down in San Diego, and Christian Tiscareno up in the Bay Area. We're going to be hosting this happy hour, just kind of all of us getting together in the Golden State and celebrating the best coast. I didn't say that out loud though, did I? Anyways, thank you guys for your time. Check out the chats. It looks like there's a lot of different resources on there. Stay tuned for that resource sheet that we'll be sending out tomorrow. And for those who are on Facebook Live, make sure you comment your email address if you would like to get access to that resource form as well and to fill out the survey. From me and the team here at the National GMSAA level, from our panelists to all of you, sending you lots of love, send you lots of light. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and we look forward to seeing you tune into our next virtual program. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you. Take care now.
Everyone.
Bye.